Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Bioneers. I am so honored, so happy to be here. And I have to tell you that I am so grateful to Nina for introducing me to you and to giving me the chance to be here today. The first time I met Nina was just a few months ago in January of this year when we both spoke at the C. Jane Do Passion to Action conference. Yay! The thing is, she spoke right before me and she gave my speech. It was almost word for word. And certainly it was idea for idea. And it was at that moment that I knew I had found a soulmate. And I adore Nina, and I can see why you all do. And Nina, I love you, and I now love all of you who are Nina's Bioneers. So thank you so much for giving me the chance to be here. So the questions that Nina raised about understanding how we feel about something as profound as women's relationship to power, and why is it that, given all those incredible statistics that she gave us, nevertheless, women still, in the US at least, account for approximately 18% of the leadership positions, whether it's politics or workplace, civic life, any sector that you look at, that's about where we are. Now, I have a question for all of you, and I need to sort of test this out. I am curious as to how you feel about controversy. Pretty good? All right, I want to do this empirically. Now, if you all were, if this was a smaller group, if it weren't 2,000 people, I would line you up and ask you to just kind of stand on a continuum between 1 and 10. 1 being, I hate it. I'd rather use facts and figures and logic and science and technology to make change. To and actually maybe feeling that it's scary, that controversy can be scary, it's threatening, it's chaotic. To those who are at a perfect 10, who say, bring it on, I love it, I get off on the adrenaline high, I think it's the only way to really make change. To those of you who may be sort of in the middle, and you know, it's kind of a necessary thing for you, but maybe not what you would do every day. So let me see the hands of the perfect 10s. I had a feeling there would be a few of you in this group. I just had a feeling. Keep your hands up for a moment if you would. Just keep your hands up through the whole thing. How many of you, yeah, you need to. How many of you would put yourself at the 1 spot? Any ones? There are actually some ones here. Okay, so all of you just keep your hands up as we're going to keep going here. I'm going to call off the numbers really fast. Our 2s, raise your hand. 3s, 4s, keep your hands up, everybody. 5s, lots of 5s. 6, lots of 6s. 7, 8, 9. All right, so give your neighbor a high five. Because we need all of those. We need all of those tools in our arsenal as we go forth to change the world and bring forth greater justice and equality for all of us. But the fact of the matter is that, particularly for women, controversy can often be a very frightening thing. Now, why is that? Well, I think that Nina also gave us that kind of statistic as well in her opening remarks. When you feel that you are oppressed, when you feel that you don't have power, when the culture is telling you you can't, you mustn't, when you are the group that is being discriminated against, raped, or beaten, you don't want to raise your head. It is frightening. It can feel very chaotic. It can be just very, very, very threatening. But I am absolutely convinced that unless women in particular learn, because I think men in general have greater skills at using controversy, or a little less afraid of taking that risk of being out there and being controversial. But I think that for women in particular, as we begin to take ourselves to that place of parity in leadership and utilize the responsibility that we have to be half of the leadership of our communities, our nation, our world, we're going to have to learn not just to use controversy, but to embrace it, to love it, to use its energy to support what we want to make happen. I don't know if you recall this particular New York Times Magazine article when the very big tsunami occurred in Indonesia a few years ago. And the article had a picture and a story of a man who was in his tiny little fishing boat, and the tsunami was coming at him full force. And instead of trying to go away from it, to move away from it, to save himself by getting away, instead, he took his little boat and he rowed it right directly into the wave. And it is that principle that I want to talk with you about today. That principle that we can take the energy that controversy gives us and we can use it to lead to the change we want to make in the world. And with that controversy, I look at it as I guess it's appropriate since I'm talking about a man in a boat, the 7 C's of controversy. And the 7 C's are these. Controversy is the courage to put your convictions out to the world, to use that as a platform so that you can state your case. That platform allows you to teach, to share, to put your ideas out there to the world. So when you do that, you may engender some conflict and some pushback. But what happens in the course of that conflict and pushback is that it forces people to clarify what they think. And that is fundamentally how the change ultimately can occur. It's just a process that I have seen happen over and over and over and over. And in the context of using controversy, the way I became really interested in it came first from my own personal story, which you did hear a little bit about. I can say that when you start out as a 15-year-old pregnant teen in West Texas in the 1950s, that's not exactly a position of power. So I did kind of have to learn on the job about all of this. And I have been very, very fortunate that I have had the opportunities to do that. And I would say that for me to know that in the course of my 40 years of activism for women, that I have had the opportunity to enable so many people to have what I didn't have, which is the knowledge that I had choices in my life, the ability to know that I could think ahead. I finally got to that point when I was 20 years old and I had my 3rd child. And it was at that point that a light bulb went off in my head. And it was a combination of maturity and I think also the advent of the birth control pill that enabled that to happen. And my son, my 3rd child, has heard that story so much he calls himself Mom's light bulb. But it really was that set me forth and enabled me to get involved in the civil rights movement, whereupon I then had this epiphany. If there are civil rights, well then, don't women have them too? But it was literally until I got to that point, and I was in my mid-20s, that I was like, oh yeah, so women have civil rights too. And it wasn't very far for me to go from there to recognize that if a woman is going to have any kind of meaningful right that and choices and power in this world, that she had to be able to to be able to make choices about her own body and her reproductive life. Now, I will say that in my journey, it was incredibly wonderful, incredibly inspiring to be from time to time in the highest halls of power. It is always even more inspiring to have women tell me, as they still do every day, "You saved my life," and I know what they mean. But what I discovered on that journey was, after I had left and I was making my own ideas happen about myself as a writer and speaker in this world, then I realized that there was nothing of me left, that I had allowed myself to be completely subsumed by the movement, that I didn't know where I ended and it began, and I had to literally recreate myself. And there again, I began to think a lot about women and power and the role that controversy and the aversion to it plays in women's ability to advance to leadership roles. I started looking at the complex relationship between women and power in the 2008 elections, when I was writing an article for Elle magazine about why women, well, actually, it turned out to be why they don't run for a political office in numbers sufficient to get us to parity for, by my calculations, 70 years at the rate we're going. And that's without having any setbacks. And they are saying that this year we may well have some setbacks. So since I can't live another 70 years as much as I'd like to, I figure, well, okay, I better try to speed the process along. So that's when I began to look at it more systematically, and when I decided that I needed to write the book that I have now written called No Excuses: 9 Ways Women Can Change How We Think About Power. And I wish I had time to tell you about all of the 9 ways, but I chose controversy deliberately because, as someone who has been a movement leader, one of the things that I saw repeatedly is that if a movement doesn't keep that insurgent idea in its head, if it doesn't keep its willingness to make controversy and take controversy, then it begins to deteriorate. And that is something that I think we as activists don't want to have happen if our movements are going to deliver on their mission and their promises to the world. We have to keep that feeling of being willing to be an insurgent and to use those. Thank you, yes. Now, there are two ways of doing that I wanted to talk to you about. There's the controversy that we make because we think it needs to be done. And there's the controversy that we take because it just comes at us. And sometimes the latter is a little easier for us to employ. The controversy that we make is when we see that there is an issue that needs to be dealt with. Some examples would be, say, again, I'll go back to the civil rights movement, a sit-in, the kinds of things that bring the issues to people's attention, making the controversy. When Margaret Sanger opened the first family planning clinic in Brooklyn in 1916, and she knew she would be arrested, and she was arrested 9 times, as a matter of fact. But in the process of doing that, she drew a lot of attention to herself, and that began to elevate the level of public support for her cause. One of my favorite stories of controversy is the Liberian market women. Have any of you seen Pray the Devil Back to Hell? Is that not just the most, oh my goodness, if you haven't seen it, as soon as you get home, please download it and look at it. But it is such a stunning example of controversy made by people who knew they needed to. These women who sold their goods in the market every day were usually the sole support of their families. There was 86% unemployment in Liberia. The dictator, Charles Taylor, had for years just decimated the country through war and economic insecurity. And these women had almost no power. I mean, they had no visible power that you could imagine, but they used what they had. They used what they had, and what they had was themselves. They went to the market every day. They said, we're going to sit down. We are not going to sell our goods. We are not going to have sex with our husbands until this war is over. And they sat, and they prayed, and they stayed together until the walls came tumbling down, until Taylor left his position, and they were able to see Ellen Sirleaf Johnson get elected as the first woman head of state elected in Africa. I would say that's controversy well made, would you not? And then there is controversy that we take, the controversy that we take. I think the best example I have ever seen of controversy taken effectively was Barack Obama when he made the speech about race in 2008. He saw that wave coming at him, and instead of ducking it, he led into it. He led the nation into a conversation that we had needed to have and that we had not had. And I have to say that wherever you may be on the political spectrum, it doesn't really matter at this point, but if you just analyze the two campaigns of Obama and Clinton, you have to really think that if Hillary Clinton had understood that principle and had led into the discussion of sexism that she encountered so incredibly, awfully from the media and from so many fronts, that she might well have changed the course of that entire primary campaign. Now, that having been said, I think that just her being out there taught the country that leadership can come in a turquoise pantsuit and with a higher pitched voice. So the controversy worked for all of us, but it didn't work quite as well for her in her campaign. So those are the reasons why we need controversy. Those are the reasons why we need to be like the man in the boat, riding into the wave and using that kind of energy to lead into change, to lead it. Similarly, embracing controversy does allow us as movement people to achieve our mission. I was very taken yesterday with what John Warner had to say about letting molecules be molecules. And I really apply that same metaphor now to my thoughts about controversy. We need to let controversy be controversy and help us out and let it lead us to where we need to go. Whether we are going to make controversy or take it, we all need to know what the goal is. And I just want to be clear that I am not suggesting that we use controversy destructively or that we engage in controversy just for its own sake, because I will confess to be one of those people who over time went from somebody who was a 1, terrified of the whole idea, to a 10. I really do get an adrenaline rush now. I'm very disappointed when I don't have picketers there to greet me. I just really feel dismissed. Very depressing. But I do want to be clear that I'm not talking about using controversy to blow up bridges or to just make controversy just because we want to. I'm talking about instead having the courage of our convictions to state our case and not being afraid to do it. And I have to tell you a little story about that. I can't resist. Going off script here. Shouldn't do this, but I'm going to. My husband and I, when we first moved to New York, we were in sticker shock about the price of apartments, and we were standing on a street corner talking to our realtor. And we were approached by a homeless man who came up to us and said, "Would you give me the money for a lobster dinner?" Is that an only in New York thing? I mean, really. So we were deeply engaged in conversation, and we did not acknowledge him. About 60 seconds later, he came a little closer and he said, "Would you give me the money for a lobster dinner?" We did, again, just sort of dismissed him. And another minute went by and he came even closer and he said, right in our faces, "Would you give me the money for a lobster dinner?" Whereupon my husband, who had actually been raised on the streets of Brooklyn and knew how to send one back, said, "What's the matter? A hamburger isn't good enough for you?" Well, this man pulled himself up to his full height, and he said, "Answer the question as asked." And so the final lesson of controversy that I want to leave you with is never answer the question as asked. Always answer the question as you want it to be, and frame that controversy. Put your convictions out there. Have the courage. State your case the way you want to state it. And that way you will, in fact, enable people to clarify how they feel, because there will be some conflict and there will be change as a result. And I just want to close by saying, first of all, thank you again for allowing me this opportunity to be here. I want to invite you, if you are interested in the subject of controversy, and if you, particularly if you are interested in the concept of the 9 ways women can change how we think about power, that you visit my website, gloriafeldt.com, and that you talk to me about the 9 ways on my 9 ways blog, because I've just started a conversation there, and I very much would like to have the opportunity to explore these topics more with you. I know I don't have the answers, but I am hoping that I can at least put the questions out, start the conversation, and that we can talk about these 9 ways that women can change how we think about power, and in so doing, bring about and lead into the wave of change. So I have a favorite poem by Rainier Marie Rilke that I wanted to leave you with today, because as I have had the opportunity to be here with you and to become a Bioneer with you, this is how I feel about the work that is being done. Again and again in history, some special people wake up. They have no ground in the crowd. They move to broader laws. They carry strange customs with them. They demand room for bold and audacious actions. The future speaks ruthlessly through them. They change the world. So let's let our spirits soar with that. Let's get in that little boat and lead with controversy right into the wave of the energy that controversy can give to us. Let's let our hearts lead forth. Let's envision a world in which the gender power balance is in fact a balance, and in which we can all share equally in both the joys, the leadership roles, and the responsibilities that come with balancing the masculine and the feminine, and allowing each of us to thrive, to grow, and to use the leadership skills that we have to our greatest advantage. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you.